In the flickering glow of the digital multiplex, where every Twitch stream is a marquee and every hot take a premiere, there's a peculiar spectacle unfolding.
That you've probably watched this before, or Bill Burr stole it from me.
Actually, Nerd Jesus died in the last year, right?
Oh, we
Steve
have
Jobs.
watched this before.
Yeah, he died, right? I know. A lot of nerds here tonight. I know, you're sad. I didn't get it. I didn't get the big deal they made about that guy. When he died, they were like, he changed the world. Doesn't say. He changed the world. The world was one way, and then Steve Jobs came, and it was another. What did he do? Somebody, for the love of God, what the f did that guy do? What did he do? He told other people what to invent? I want my entire music collection in that phone. Get on it, right? And then these poor, nameless, faceless scientists got to go in a back room and figure it out. How the f going to get all of this into this? I mean, what year does this guy think this is? This is crazy. This is like Buck Rogers. Dude, my kid has a birthday in like 11 months. Steve Jobs just walking by. I don't hear any thinking going on in there. Strutting around the office, eating some pretentious fruit like a pear, right? Just throwing out ideas.
There was a famous, hard-to-verify story about a creation of iPod, how he got an engineer sample of an iPod, he put it into water, bubbles floated, and he said, it has a lot of empty space. What about it? Or what?
Well, there's another one. There's another one I just came up with on the way to work. I was reading a magazine the other day, turning pages. You know, I like to turn pages on a screen that aren't even there. Yeah, wrap your around that, guys. See you in 8 years. Where you going, Michael? Big, little, get on it, right? And all these people slave away to make his vision come true. And then they have the big nerd fest, right? Down there, Comic-Con and all.
It always feels like the issue. This is like a human issue. Whenever something isn't working perfectly, instead of taking the lessons you've learned from the thing that wasn't working perfectly and then carrying them forward into a new paradigm, people want to eject everything from the last paradigm and change completely. I don't know why. I don't know why people just tend to think this way. I think it's ridiculous, but whatever.
Product genius that brought them to that monopolistic position gets rotted out by people running these companies who have no conception of a good product versus a bad product. They have no conception of the craftsmanship that's required to take a good idea and turn it into a good product. And they really have no feeling in their hearts, usually, about wanting to really help the customers. So that's what happened at Xerox. The people at Xerox PARC used to call the people who ran Xerox toner heads. And they just had these toner heads would come out to Xerox PARC and they just had no clue about what they were seeing. And for our audience, toner is what?
Steve was an actual visionary, but bro died like, eating asparagus for his cancer or whatever? I mean, like, one of the things that's really hard is I hear this happens in the research world, but I don't actually know. I don't actually know if this is true. So I'm repeating this. Okay, take this with a grain of salt. I've read this in quite a few articles though. That somebody can have a really good paper that they've published, and then they're seen as kind of like almost this quasi-authority figure in their particular discipline, but the rest of their work is like kind of but they can ride off of the success of that one paper such that they're still taken seriously, even if their ideas past that paper were never really that great. People say that like Steve Jobs was a huge visionary. Was he? I feel like they had basically the iPhone and like the iPod, which I think technologically had a lot of overlap, even if it didn't seem like it initially. But like that was it, right? Like prior to the iPhone, Apple was like a 2% market share company, no? Destiny, the iMac was huge. How huge are we talking? iMac, can I even look at this? Market share? In what year? Are you implying that we would have had the iPhone or iPod regardless of Steve Jobs? I'm not sure, actually. I don't know. I think that Steve Jobs is, I think the iPhone and the iPad was, or the iPhone and the iPod were cool, were good. But it's not like he was designing product after product after product after product after product. It was that, I think he had a really good idea with that, and he made it possible, so yeah. But I don't know, people give him a lot of credit. And there was one huge banger, I think. There's also, I think, this is like fantasy and conjecture that is like, exists in my head with no background. I don't know, I could be totally wrong. But sometimes I wonder if you get these people who seem like they're visionaries, but they're not really, but they are really good at like riding people's asses, and they can make things happen that people didn't know just because of how much of a hard ass they are. Sometimes I wonder if for SpaceX and for Tesla, if Elon was able to do that, not because he was like a super genius, but because there were a lot of legitimately talented people working there, and he was the only person unreasonable enough to be like, hey, we need to cut this by 10%. Hey, this needs to be half the size. And on paper, these were like demands. And maybe Elon was too stupid to even realize how crazy the demands were. But because he happened to place them on a group of really talented people, they happened to come up with things that did actually fit the criteria or meet the mold of what he wanted. And that's where these huge pushes come from. But maybe it just takes somebody like kind of stupid to make that push. But I don't know. I'm like, that's a super conjectured. Bill Burr literally says that.
Destiny is no stranger to the art of deconstruction, slicing through bad takes with the finesse of a sushi chef. But tonight, he's not debating policy or dunking on a rival streamer. He's reacting to Bill Burr, the foul-mouthed poet of stand-up, tearing into Steve Jobs like a pit bull with a grudge. Burr's routine is a Molotov cocktail lobbed at the altar of nerd Jesus, painting Jobs not as a god, but as a glorified taskmaster, barking orders while faceless engineers sweat in the shadows. Destiny's response is a masterclass in ambivalence, a tightrope walk between chuckling at Burr's audacity and grappling with the deeper questions it raises. Was Jobs a visionary or a vampire? A genius or a glorified hype man? And what does it mean to lionize a figure like him in a world built on collective toil? Let's rewind the tape and set the scene. Burr's roast is a thing of savage beauty, a stand-up set that plays like a punk anthem in a cathedral. He's on stage, pacing like a caged animal, mocking the sanctification of Jobs' legacy with a sneer that could curdle milk. Jobs didn't change the world, Burr argues. He just yelled at smarter people until they made his dreams real. The iPod, the iPhone, those weren't Jobs' blueprints. They were the blood and sweat of nameless tech grunts, slaving away while Jobs played the role of pretentious fruit peddler, tossing out half-baked ideas like a dictator demanding a palace by sunrise. Burr's genius is in the absurdity he conjures. Jobs dunking an iPod prototype in water, spotting bubbles, and declaring it too spacious, like a mad king critiquing a cathedral's feng shui. It's hilarious, but it's also a Molotov cocktail aimed at the heart of tech's hero worship culture. And Destiny's reaction is the spark that lights the fuse. Destiny's laughter is the first thing you notice, a sharp, almost startled bark that cuts through the stream's ambient hum. He's tickled by Burr's irreverence, by the sheer gall of reducing Jobs, a figure embalmed in Silicon Valley's mythology, to a bullying idea guy. But there's a restlessness in his response, a liberal's unease simmering beneath the surface. As a liberal observer, perched in the balcony of this ideological theater, the tension is palpable. Liberalism thrives on the idea of collective progress, on the belief that great things come from shared effort, not singular demigods. Burr's roast aligns with that ethos, shining a spotlight on the engineers, the coders, the unsung heroes who actually built the iPhone while Jobs took the bows. Yet Destiny's ambivalence betrays a deeper conflict. The liberal impulse to celebrate collaboration is at odds with the seductive allure of the visionary, the lone genius who bends the arc of history with a keynote and a turtleneck. This is where the narrative takes on the texture of a tragicomedy, a Coen brothers riff where the laughs are laced with existential dread. Destiny doesn't fully buy Burr's takedown, but he doesn't dismiss it either. He's caught in the gray zone, wrestling with the myth of Jobs as a product genius versus the reality of a man who, by many accounts, was a tyrant with a knack for branding. Destiny muses on the iPod and iPhone, acknowledging their revolutionary impact, but questioning whether Jobs was the mastermind or just the loudest voice in the room. It's a question that cuts to the heart of tech's origin stories, which too often read like hagiographies, airbrushing out the labor of the many to glorify the one. As a liberal, there's a bitter satisfaction in Burr's roast. It's a reminder that no one builds an empire alone, that the cult of the CEO is a lie we tell ourselves to make sense of a chaotic world. But there's also a pang of loss, a recognition that we crave these larger-than-life figures, even when we know they're flawed. Burr's routine is a masterclass in deflation, stripping Jobs of his halo with the precision of a surgeon. He paints a picture of a man who didn't invent but demanded, who didn't create but curated, strutting through Apple's offices like a rock star while engineers scrambled to turn his whims into reality. Destiny's reaction leans into this, but he's not content to let Burr's caricature stand unchallenged. He speculates on Jobs' role, wondering if the man's true genius was in his relentlessness, his ability to push people beyond their limits. It's a provocative idea, one that Destiny extends to other tech titans like Elon Musk, suggesting that maybe vision isn't about brilliance but about being the one stubborn enough or stupid enough to make impossible demands. There's comedy in this, a kind of cosmic joke about how progress sometimes hinges on the arrogance of a single loudmouth. The metaphor of the multiplex comes into sharp focus as Destiny's stream unfolds, each segment a different screen playing a different film. Burr's roast is the raucous comedy in Theater 1, all sharp elbows and belly laughs, but Destiny's reaction is the introspective drama in Theater 2, a quieter exploration of what it means to build something in a world obsessed with credit. He's not just reacting to Burr. He's reacting to the culture that canonized Jobs, the same culture that turns tech moguls into messiahs while erasing the labor that props them up. As a liberal, this resonates like a minor chord. Liberalism is supposed to champion the collective, to lift up the unsung, but it's hard to resist the allure of a good origin story, especially when it's packaged in a sleek, minimalist keynote. Jobs wasn't just selling phones. He was selling a narrative, and we all bought tickets. Destiny's musings take a speculative turn, and it's here that the narrative veers into science fiction territory, a what-if scenario that feels like a Philip K. Dick short story. He wonders if Jobs' success, and by extension, the success of figures like Musk, stems not from genius, but from a kind of reckless audacity, a willingness to make demands so outrageous they force innovation. It's a theory that's equal parts absurd and compelling, like a plot twist in a heist movie where the mastermind's plan only works because it's so unhinged. Destiny's not sure if he believes it himself. He's quick to label it conjecture, a thought experiment born of late-night streams and too much coffee. But as a liberal, there's a discomfort in this idea, a recognition that progress often comes with a human cost. The engineers who met Jobs' demands weren't just solving puzzles. They were enduring a culture of fear and burnout, their contributions reduced to footnotes in Apple's glossy mythology. The comedy of Destiny's reaction lies in its contradictions, the way he oscillates between Burr's cynicism and his own reluctant admiration for Jobs' impact. He's laughing at the image of Jobs as a pretentious fruit peddler, but he's also grappling with the undeniable reality of the iPhone, a device that reshaped culture in ways even Burr can't dismiss. It's a tug-of-war between skepticism and awe, played out in real time as Destiny's chat lights up with memes and hot takes. As a liberal observer, there's a kind of joy in this messiness, in the way Destiny refuses to settle for easy answers. Liberalism, at its best, is about embracing complexity, about holding space for both the roast and the reverence. But it's also a reminder of how hard it is to tell a collective story in a world obsessed with singular heroes. The tragedy of this narrative isn't in Jobs' legacy or Burr's takedown, it's in the broader cultural fault lines they expose. We live in an era where innovation is fetishized, but the labor behind it is invisible, buried under the weight of charismatic figureheads. Destiny's reaction is a microcosm of that tension, a liberal's attempt to reconcile the myth of the visionary with the reality of the exploited. He's not just reacting to Burr, he's reacting to a world that rewards the loudest voice, the slickest pitch, while the real work happens off-screen. And as a liberal, there's a call to action here, a challenge to rewrite the script, to tell stories that honor the many over the one. So here's to Destiny, the projectionist of Twitch's crowded multiplex, still spinning reels even as the audience argues over the plot. Here's to Bill Burr, the stand-up anarchist who dared to roast a tech god and lived to tell the tale. And here's to the liberal ideal, flickering in the dark, still dreaming of a world where the credits roll long enough to name everyone who made the magic happen.